The scream that tore through the HOA parking lot still haunts me. 1 second, my 14-year-old daughter Zara was stepping out of our SUV, adjusting her backpack, and the next, HOA, Karen came charging across the pavement like a storm. Before I could even process what was happening, she kicked my daughter so hard that the crack of breaking ribs echoed against the cars around us. Zara collapsed instantly, gasping for breath, clutching her side, tears streaming down her face as Karen stood over her, shouting something about people like you ruining this neighborhood. I froze just for a heartbeat because seeing my child broken, shaking, unable to breathe does something to a parent's soul. And what Karen didn't know was this: my daughter wasn't just any child. Her attack was about to trigger a chain reaction so massive, 152 airports across the country would shut down. When you're a parent, you think you're prepared for anything: fevers, heartbreaks, scraped knees, school fights, but nothing prepares you for the moment you watch your child struggle to breathe on the concrete because another adult chose violence. As I held Zara in my arms, feeling her ribs shift under my hands, a cold shock spread through my chest. This wasn't a simple neighborhood argument. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a hate-fueled attack on a black teenage girl who had done absolutely nothing wrong. And as the paramedics rushed her away, my mind kept replaying her whisper, "Daddy, I can't breathe." Standing there, watching the ambulance doors slam shut, I felt every part of me change. A switch flipped. A line had been crossed that could never be uncrossed. Karen had no idea who she had laid hands on, no clue whose daughter she had just brutalized. She didn't know the world my family came from, the power we had access to, or the networks that moved the moment Zara was hurt. But before I take you into the storm that followed, I want to talk directly to you watching this right now. Which city are you watching from? Drop your city name in the comments. I love knowing how far our community reaches across the USA. And before we dive straight into what happened next, trust me, you'll want to hear every second. Take a moment to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss stories like this one. Because what started in a quiet HOA parking lot soon exploded into a national incident. An incident so big, so shocking, that just hours later, 152 airports across the country shut down. The day had started like any other Saturday morning, calm, bright, and deceptively ordinary, the kind of morning that gives you no warning of a storm waiting just around the corner. Zara sat beside me in passenger seat, humming along to her favorite playlist, tapping her fingers on her thigh, in that little rhythm she did whenever she was excited about something. We were only stopping by the HOA office for a quick form signature, something that should have taken 5 minutes at most. As I pulled into the parking lot, there was nothing unusual: a few SUVs, a couple walking their golden retriever, an older man sweeping leaves from his driveway. But then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her, Karen, arms folded across her chest, jaw clenched, eyes narrowed, that signature HOA clipboard tucked under her arm like a weapon she couldn't wait to swing. I didn't think much of it. Karen always looked angry, offended, or inconvenienced by someone's mere existence. But what I didn't know, what I couldn't have known, was that in the next 60 seconds, she would commit an act of violence that would reshape not just my life, but the country's. Zara stepped out of the car first, smiling, adjusting her backpack, her curls bouncing in the sunlight. She looked so small, so young, so heartbreakingly innocent. I grabbed the paperwork from the dashboard and walked around her side, ready to lock the car when I heard it. Karen's voice, sharp and venomous. "You don't belong here," she snapped, marching toward us with heavy, aggressive steps. At first, I hoped she was yelling about something else. Maybe parking lines. Maybe the new mailbox regulation she kept harassing everyone about. But then she pointed directly at my daughter, eyes burning with a fury I couldn't comprehend. "I said you don't belong here." Before I could even move toward her, before I could shield Zara or step between them, Karen closed the distance in less than 3 seconds. Zara tried to take a step back, confused, frightened, clutching the strap of her backpack tighter. "Ma'am, I'm just," Zara began, but she didn't get to finish. Karen shouted something unintelligible, something about keeping the neighborhood safe, something about people invading her space, and then she did something so unthinkable my brain refused to register it. She raised her leg and kicked my daughter with full force in the ribs. The sound, God, that sound, a sharp crack, like snapping a piece of dry wood. I felt my heart plummet. Zara's body folded, her knees buckling as she fell sideways onto the concrete, gasping, wheezing, her small hands instinctively clutching her side. Her backpack slid across the pavement, the zipper splitting open as her notebooks scattered everywhere. I froze for one horrifying second, a reflex parents don't talk about, a moment where your mind tries to understand the impossible sight in front of you. Then something inside me detonated. I dropped everything, paperwork, car keys, and ran to Zara. "Baby, breathe, breathe, look at me," I whispered, lifting her gently, trying not to aggravate her injuries. She cried out in pain, a sound so raw it cut through every part of me. Her breaths were short, shallow, panicked. She couldn't inhale properly. Her ribs were damaged badly. Behind me, Karen kept shouting, pacing like she was the victim, like she was the one wronged. "I warned you people," she shrieked, pointing at Zara like she was some kind of threat. "She shouldn't be here. I told the board. I told them this would happen." Her voice shook, but not with regret, with entitlement, with arrogance, with the disgusting confidence of someone who believed she had the right to assault a child simply because of who she thought she was. "Stay away from her," I growled, turning toward Karen with a fury I didn't know I was capable of. But Karen didn't back down. She had that wild, entitled look in her eyes, the kind of look that told me she wasn't just delusional, she was dangerous. She pointed her clipboard at me like it was a weapon, like she still thought she had authority here. "If you call the police, you'll regret it," she warned. "I know people. I run this community. You have no idea who you're dealing with." The irony of that line would become painfully clear later. Because Karen, in her arrogance, her entitlement, her ignorant rage, had attacked the daughter of a man she should have never crossed. A businessman whose influence ran far beyond HOA lines. A family whose connections stretched across industries, governments, and institutions she couldn't even imagine. Zara wasn't just a child. She wasn't just another resident's daughter. She was the daughter of a man whose last meeting just 2 weeks earlier was with individuals who oversaw parts of the aviation sector. People whose decisions could shut down entire states. People who didn't tolerate injustice or violence against one of their own. But in that moment, none of that mattered. The only thing that mattered was my daughter's trembling body in my arms and the fear in her eyes as she whispered, "Daddy, I can't breathe." And that was when everything snapped inside me. I shouted for help, my voice echoing across the parking lot. A few neighbors peeked out from behind curtains or cracked doors, but no one stepped forward. No one intervened. That silence, that cowardice, would later haunt many of them when the truth came out. I pulled out my phone with shaking hands, dialing 911 while Karen hovered nearby, muttering under her breath, still convinced she was justified. When the dispatcher answered, I forced myself to speak clearly. "My daughter has been attacked. She can't breathe. Send paramedics. Now, please." I gave them the address, my voice cracking as Zara whimpered in pain. When I hung up, I looked at Karen and said, "You don't understand what you've done." She smirked, actually smirked. "Oh, I understand perfectly," she replied. "I'm protecting my community." But she understood nothing. Not about my daughter. Not about me. And certainly not about the chain reaction that her single act of hatred had just set in motion. Because within the next few hours, news would travel. Calls would be made. A protocol, one created years ago, would be activated. A protocol powerful enough to halt aviation nationwide. A protocol that would eventually lead to 152 airports shutting down. And it all began here, on the concrete, with a child gasping for air, and a woman who had no idea her world was about to collapse. The paramedics arrived faster than I expected, their sirens slicing through the tense silence of the neighborhood as they pulled into the HOA parking lot. Karen stood stiffly to the side, arms crossed like she was the supervisor of the entire situation instead of the attacker. When the ambulance doors flung open, Two EMTs rushed toward us, their faces shifting instantly from professional calm to alarm as they saw Zara curled in my arms, struggling to breathe. Her ribs. I choked. I heard something crack. Please, she can't inhale properly. One EMT knelt beside Zara, assessing her with rapid precision as the other gently lifted her onto a stretcher. Zara cried out, her voice thin and strained, gripping the EMT's wrist with trembling fingers. "We need to get her to the hospital immediately," he said, and I nodded furiously, wiping tears I didn't remember producing. As they began pushing her toward the ambulance, Karen stepped forward as if she had any authority to intervene. "Wait," she snapped. "You can't take her. We haven't filed an incident report yet, and I need her information. This is community property. She was trespassing." The audacity of her words was so ridiculous, so infuriating, that even the EMT froze mid-step. He looked at Karen with an expression I recognized, disbelief mixed with disgust. "Ma'am, step back," he said firmly. "A child is injured." But Karen wasn't done. She pointed at Zara like she was pointing at a crime scene. "Her father is exaggerating. That girl threw herself on the ground when I attempted to ask them why they were here. I didn't touch her. She wasn't just lying, she was trying to rewrite the entire reality in front of a crowd. Twisting her own violent act into some fabricated story she convinced herself was true. And for a moment, the neighbors who had gathered on their porches, the same ones who had refused to step in, looked between us, unsure, afraid to take a side. That hesitation told me something deep about this community. They weren't afraid of the truth. They were afraid of Karen, or rather of the web of influence she had woven through the HOA. But that web was about to snap. Hard. The EMTs loaded Zara into the ambulance, and I climbed in behind her. Her eyes fluttered, her breaths sharp and uneven. "Daddy," she whispered. "It hurts. It really hurts." My heart clenched. "I know, baby. We're getting you help. Just hold on." As the ambulance pulled away, I saw Karen standing there, smirking again, like she believed she'd win whatever twisted game she thought she was playing. She didn't know her smirk would be the last time she'd ever feel that kind of confidence. When we reached the hospital, a trauma team was already waiting. They rushed Zara into imaging, and I sat alone in the hallway, head buried in my hands, every second stretching into an eternity. I replayed the attack over and over, her scream, the crack of ribs, Karen's poisonous voice, the indifference of the neighbors. My phone vibrated in my pocket. First, a message from my brother. "Call me. It's urgent." Then one from my business partner. "We heard. The team is already moving." Then another. "Are you safe? Where is Zara? Let me know immediately." Confusion spread through me. I hadn't told them anything. I barely had time to dial 911. How did they know? I opened the first message and called my brother. "How did you find out?" I asked, voice shaking. He exhaled sharply. "Someone recorded the incident. It's already online. Millions have seen it." My blood chilled. The tremor in his voice told me this wasn't just trending, it was blowing up. "And listen," he continued, his tone dropping. "Dad's team got the footage before it went viral. They activated Protocol 47. My heart skipped a beat. Protocol 47 wasn't just a policy. It was a high-level security measure used only in extreme emergencies, ones involving family members affiliated with major federal or international operations. Zara, through her grandfather's position, was directly connected to a network that monitored national security threats. Protocol 47 was designed to freeze infrastructure, lock down transportation, and mobilize specialized units to protect targeted families. And if that protocol was activated, airports wouldn't just be delayed. They would shut down. Before I could process any of it, a doctor approached me. "Zara has 2 fractured ribs and 1 partially displaced," she explained. "Luckily, her lungs weren't punctured, but her breathing will be painful for days. She's stable now. You can see her." Relief washed over me so intensely I nearly collapsed. I followed the doctor into Zara's room. She lay in the bed, hooked up to monitors, her curls messy, her eyes tired but alive. "Daddy," she whispered, managing a small, weak smile. I kissed her forehead. "You're safe now. I promise." But as I sat next to her, I noticed hospital staff whispering, glancing at me, and quickly turning away. A nurse walked in and asked, "Sir, are you the father of the patient from the HOA attack?" I nodded cautiously. She swallowed hard. "Sir, the FBI is here. And so is Homeland Security." I froze. "Why?" "Because," she said, lowering her voice, "the incident triggered a national response. They said a protocol was activated. Something about your daughter being connected to a high-level security clearance." My breath stilled. "They're here." "Yes, and there's more. News channels outside, helicopters above the building. Sir, the country is watching this." I stood up slowly, my pulse drowning out the beeping machines. I walked out into the hallway, and there they were, agents in suits, badges out, talking quietly into radios. One approached me. "Sir," he said with a firm but respectful tone, "we need to speak with you about the incident. A coordinated protection protocol has been activated at the federal level. We need every detail of your daughter's attack." I blinked. "Is this because of Protocol 47? He nodded. "Yes, sir. And because of the online reaction. This isn't just a neighborhood assault anymore. It's a national event. People are protesting. The footage has been shared by influencers, politicians, civil rights leaders. We're already seeing mass movement at airports, train stations, and federal buildings." I swallowed hard. "Airports?" He spoke into his radio before answering. "As of 10 minutes ago, 43 airports have suspended operations nationwide." I staggered back. 43. He nodded again. "And more are expected. Your daughter's attack has triggered a nationwide call for justice. People are demanding accountability, protection measures, investigations into racial hate crimes within HOAs, and emergency actions. The aviation sector is preparing for a full-scale shutdown unless the situation is addressed immediately." My mind spun. Zara lay injured because of a senseless act of hatred. And now the country was reacting with a force I never anticipated. Karen had no idea that her violence would ignite a movement that would reach airports, federal agencies, and the highest levels of security. The agent stepped aside when he received a new message in his earpiece, listening for a moment before turning back to me. His expression had shifted from controlled professionalism to stunned disbelief. "Sir," he said slowly, "we've just received confirmation. As of right now, 152 airports across the country have shut down. The news of the attack didn't just spread, it detonated. Within hours, the HOA community that once hid behind their curtains was now under an unforgiving national spotlight, and every resident felt the heat. The moment the footage hit mainstream platforms, the comment section exploded like wildfire. Arrest her. Protect black children. This could have been my daughter. HOAs have gone too far. The video had been posted by a teenager from the neighborhood who had witnessed the entire thing from his bedroom window, recording Karen's violent kick and Zara's collapse with trembling hands. Overnight, it became the #1 trending video in the country, and by morning, millions had seen it. News vans swarmed outside the HOA gates, reporters huddled together, microphones pointed toward any resident brave enough to step outside. Some neighbors hid, terrified of being caught on camera. Others stepped out only to express shock and deep concern, pretending they had no idea Karen was this unhinged, even though they absolutely did. The HOA board panicked, scrambling for statements, emergency meetings, and damage control. Their official email to residents was a pathetic attempt at distancing themselves. "We do not condone violence in any form," it began. Yet they conveniently ignored the fact that Karen had been their enforcer for years. She was the one they empowered, the one they praised, the one they allowed to police the neighborhood with an iron fist. As the story gained momentum, community activists began showing up outside the gated entrance, holding signs demanding justice for Zara. "Protect our kids and HOA. Abuse. She deserves better. and "Arrest Karen" were plastered across cardboard boards as protesters grew in number by the hour. Cars stopped, honking in support. Mothers brought their children, holding them close as they chanted Zara's name. Even people who had never heard of our neighborhood before were now standing at the gates, outraged, emotional, demanding accountability. Live streams from the scene attracted hundreds of thousands of viewers. One TikTok clip alone reached 20 million views in under 9 hours, sparking national conversations about HOAs, racism, and violence against minors. Civil rights leaders began tagging federal agencies, urging them to intervene. Inside the community, fear spread like a disease. Neighbors who once walked past us without a nod were now leaving handwritten notes on our front porch, apologies, prayers, confessions of guilt for not stepping in sooner. Some notes were heartfelt, others were cowardly attempts at absolution. But guilt hung in the air like smoke, thick, suffocating, undeniable. Parents were furious that their children had seen the attack online. Some demanded immediate removal of the HOA board, others threatened lawsuits. Residents who once tolerated Karen's harassment were suddenly speaking up about her long history of aggressive behavior. The time she screamed at a 9-year-old for riding his bike on the sidewalk, the time she threatened to fine an elderly couple over their front door wreath, the time she called the cops on a neighbor's teenage son for looking suspicious while carrying groceries. Everyone knew Karen was a problem, but no one stopped her. Until now, while the neighborhood turned into a circus outside, the hospital where Zara was recovering became the epicenter of something even bigger. Supporters from across the city arrived with flowers, cards, and messages of strength. Local pastors visited, offering prayers for healing. Nurses left sticky notes on the door with hearts drawn on them. People who had never met Zara felt connected to her innocence, her pain, her bravery. They wanted her to know she wasn't alone. And Zara, though still in pain, felt it. Every message, every gesture, every sign held outside the building added another layer of strength to her fragile smile. Meanwhile, the HOA board held an emergency meeting that quickly turned into a disaster. Residents stormed into the room, demanding Karen's immediate arrest. Board members tried to deflect blame, insisting Karen acted on her own and did not represent the HOA's values. But no one was buying it. A mother stood up, her voice shaking with anger, and shouted, "You all let her behave like this. You encouraged it." The room erupted. People began shouting over each other, recounting experiences of Karen's bullying behavior. Some residents cried as they shared stories they had kept quiet out of fear of retaliation. Others admitted they had filed complaints about Karen that the board ignored. A man slammed his fist on the table. "A child could have died because of your negligence," he roared. Board members looked small, cornered, helpless. The illusion of their authority was crumbling right in front of them. When the police finally arrived at the HOA office to question the board, the commotion intensified. Karen, who had been hiding inside her home since the video went viral, was reportedly refusing to come out. She claimed she was the real victim, blaming outsiders and media storms for ruining her life. Residents watched officers knock on her door repeatedly, but she refused to answer. Reporters caught the entire standoff live, amplifying the drama nationwide. Hashtags like #JusticeForZara, #ArrestKaren, and #HOAReformNow dominated every social platform. Activists began digging into Karen's background. Old emails leaked. Stories surfaced of her previous complaints against families of color in the neighborhood. The nation wasn't just angry, it was disgusted. Then came the moment that changed everything. A major news network aired a segment analyzing the attack frame by frame. They showed Zara's body collapsing, the angle of the kick, the force behind it. Experts explained how dangerous such an attack could be to a child's vital organs. Child psychologists weighed in. Trauma specialists spoke about long-term psychological impact. The footage became more than a viral clip, it became evidence, powerful, undeniable evidence of a hate-driven assault. At the hospital, the reaction was overwhelming. Security was tightened. Officers were stationed outside Zara's room. Agents continued interviewing me about every detail of the attack. One of them explained quietly, "Sir, The country has never seen anything quite like this. People are reacting because it's not just about your daughter. It's about every parent who's ever feared their child would be targeted like this. And then came the breaking news alert. A reporter, voice trembling with urgency, announced on live television. We have now received official confirmation. 152 airports across the United States have suspended operations following the viral attack on a 14-year-old girl in a suburban HOA community. This is unprecedented. The world froze. The community froze. The country froze. My daughter's pain had become a national awakening, and Karen's world, once protected by the HOA shield, was about to collapse under the weight of millions demanding justice. The moment the airport shutdown made national headlines, everything escalated into a level of intensity one never imagined possible. What had begun as a senseless act of violence in a quiet HOA parking lot now ignited one of the most heavily coordinated investigations in recent years. By sunrise the next morning, the hospital looked less like a medical center and more like a command post. Federal agents lined the hallways, local police took positions near every exit, and security protocols tightened to the point where even hospital staff needed clearance to approach Zara's room. As the father of the victim, I was escorted to a secure conference room on the 3rd floor. A room filled with people wearing badges from agencies I'd only heard about on the news. FBI, DHS, DOJ, even representatives from the National Task Force for Child Protection. Their faces were stern, focused, controlled, but the energy in a room was sharp like electricity. In the center of the table sat the printed screenshots from the viral video, enlarged photos of Zara on the ground, the timestamp, the angle of Karen's kick, and the details of the HOA layout. A lead agent, a tall woman with a calm but authoritative voice, started the briefing. "Mr. Grant," she said, "the attack on your daughter has triggered not only local outrage, but a national security response due to the activation of Protocol 47. We need a detailed account of everything that happened before, during, and after the incident." I told them everything, every step, every sound, every word Karen had said. I told them how Zara had simply stepped out of the car, how Karen had approached us like a missile fueled by rage, how the kick wasn't an accident or a shove, it was deliberate, forceful, hateful. As I spoke, agents scribbled notes, others reviewed footage on laptops, some listened with hardened expressions. The room's atmosphere shifted when I reached the part where Zara whispered, "Daddy, I can't breathe." Even the toughest faces softened for a moment. But the questioning wasn't just about the attack. They asked about the HOA's history, Karen's behavior, tensions within the community, previous incidents, and any signs of bias or patterns. Did Karen ever target other families? They asked. Did she ever exhibit hostility toward your family specifically? Did the HOA board enable her behavior? Their questions sharpened like blades slicing through the surface-level narrative to expose everything beneath. While I was being interviewed upstairs, downstairs the hospital entrance looked like the front gate of the White House, crowded with protesters, shielded by barricades, watched over by police on horseback, and lit up by the constant flash of camera crews. Chants of "Justice for Zara" echoed through the street. Reporters delivered live updates every hour. Drones hovered above to capture the crowd. Inside the HOA, the situation had become equally chaotic. Local police, under federal direction, ordered a full-scale sweep of Karen's home. When officers searched her property, they didn't just find HOA paperwork and violation slips, they found dozens of recorded rants, documents proving she filed targeted complaints against minority families, including ours, and even handwritten notes showing her obsession with protecting the community from outsiders. The discovery hit national television within minutes, feeding a fire that was already raging across the country. Simultaneously, investigators arrived at the HOA office to retrieve all archived complaints, emails, and recordings. Under federal order, the board was forced to release everything, and what they uncovered shocked even the agents. Not only had Karen been protected for years, but there were emails from board members praising her for being strict, fearless, and willing to confront people others are scared to. They treated her aggression like a valuable skill. Worse, They had dismissed or buried complaints from families she targeted. All of it pointed toward a clear pattern of discrimination and negligence. The agents reviewing the evidence shook their heads in disbelief. One muttered under his breath, "This isn't just one bad actor. This is systemic." And systemic meant the investigation was no longer just about Karen. It was about the entire HOA, its leadership, its practices, its failures. Meanwhile, back at the hospital, a new team arrived, analysts from the Cyber Intelligence Division. They requested permission to search my phone and Zara's belongings, explaining that online threats were now circulating. Some extremist accounts, furious that the country shut down for a black girl, began posting hateful messages. Others glorified Karen. It sickened me. The agents assured me they had already flagged these accounts and were deploying digital tracing teams to identify the sources. They took the threats seriously, deadly seriously, because national cases often attract dangerous individuals hiding behind screens. And when the safety of a minor was at risk, they moved fast. It wasn't just the digital threats that required immediate attention. High-ranking officials began contacting the investigative team, demanding updates. Senators released statements condemning the attack. Governors held emergency press conferences about the airport shutdown. Even the Secretary of Transportation addressed the nation, explaining why flight operations had halted. "Until we assess the safety concerns raised by this unprecedented event," he said, "we must ensure security nationwide." Millions of passengers were stranded in airports, watching the story unfold on giant TV screens above their gates. Some cried out of frustration, but many cried because the footage of Zara reminded them of their own children, because the injustice felt personal, because the nation was finally confronting something it had ignored for far too long. Back in the hospital conference room, the lead agent played a slowed-down version of the attack footage. Everyone watched the moment Karen's foot connected with Zara's ribs. The room was silent except for the low hum of the projector. When the video ended, the agent paused. "This act," she said slowly, "meets the criteria for aggravated assault on a minor motivated by racial prejudice. Combined with the national response, this is now classified as a federal hate crime investigation." The words hit me like a tidal wave, not because I didn't believe Karen deserved it, but because I finally felt the weight of justice shifting. For once, the system wasn't looking away. For once, people were listening. For once, an innocent black girl wasn't being dismissed. As the investigation deepened, more layers of the truth emerged. Witnesses from the neighborhood began coming forward, submitting statements to the authorities. A teenage girl admitted she had seen Karen yelling at Zara weeks earlier for walking too loud. A retired couple confessed that they had overheard Karen complaining about new people ruining the community. Another resident revealed that Karen bragged about her influence over the board and claimed she could get rid of anyone she didn't like. Every testimony added another piece to the puzzle. A puzzle that painted Karen as not just violent, but dangerous, calculating, and emboldened by the power the HOA handed her. Hours later, an agent returned to Zara's room with a printed document. "Mr. Grant," he said, "the federal warrant is approved. Karen is officially wanted for arrest." My breath caught. "When?" I whispered. "Now," he replied. But even that wasn't the biggest news. He took a deep breath before continuing. "Given the evidence from the HOA, this case is being expanded. It's now classified as a multi-agency investigation into civil rights violations, abuse of authority, and systemic discrimination." My chest tightened. This wasn't justice for Zara alone. It was justice for every family Karen had harmed, every child she intimidated, every person she made feel unwelcome in their own home. And then, as the agent stepped aside, another official entered the room with breaking news. "Sir, Karen attempted to flee her home, but the National Guard has intercepted her. She's in custody." The investigation had begun, and justice was finally chasing the woman who thought she was untouchable. Even after Karen's arrest, Even after the charges were filed and the HOA's entire structure began collapsing like a rotten foundation exposed to sunlight, I thought the worst was over. I thought the investigation, the protests, the airport shutdown, the national outrage, all of it had reached its peak. But I was wrong. The real twist, the one that would shake not just our community but the entire country, was still waiting in the shadows. It began when a federal data analyst approached the lead investigation team with a pale, shaken expression. He carried a folder pressed tightly against his chest like it was dangerous to even hold. "We found something," he said. The room grew still instantly. The folder contained logs, encrypted files, and screenshots, not from Karen's devices, but from an internal HOA software that had never been disclosed. It was a surveillance system, hidden, sophisticated, and illegal. Karen didn't just write violation notices or enforce petty rules. She had access to a private tracking network the HOA board used to monitor residents. Unauthorized cameras hidden in streetlights, license plate readers installed at the gate, audio devices disguised near community mailboxes, all feeding data into a system run not by the HOA, but by a private contractor they hired off the books. Karen had been watching families for years, collecting information she had no right to hold. The agents stared at the logs in disbelief. Timestamps, movement charts, clips of neighbors walking, laughing, arguing, even children playing. But the most disturbing part wasn't the surveillance itself. It was the list labeled red flag residents. Zara's name was on it. So was mine. So were the names of multiple minority families. "This isn't just an abuse of power," an agent whispered. "This is targeted racial profiling." The more investigators dug into the contractor, the darker the truth became. The company supplying the surveillance tech had ties to a former board president, a man forced to resign 3 years earlier for personal reasons, a polite cover for corruption allegations that were never fully proven. The board had secretly paid him to install the system under the guise of community safety improvements. Karen had been his enforcer, the person he trusted to collect intel, report suspicious families, and maintain neighborhood purity, a phrase found in one of his disturbing emails. The discovery cracked the case open into something far more sinister. It wasn't just about Karen attacking Zara. It was about years of concealed discrimination, manipulation, and organized harassment. A full-blown conspiracy buried beneath HOA bureaucracy. Federal agents swarmed the HOA office once again, seizing computers, hard drives, and financial records. The board members who once stood tall now crumbled, weeping, panicking, begging for deals. One confessed instantly, claiming she didn't know what she was signing and was just following the president's instructions. Another tried to flee, but was detained. The contractor who created the surveillance system was arrested in another state. The scandal consumed the media. News anchors reported it with wide eyes, calling it one of the largest discovered abuses of civilian surveillance powers in suburban America. Social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag HOA spyring, hashtag they knew, and hashtag justice for Zara trended globally. People demanded nationwide audits of HOAs. Civil rights organizations launched lawsuits. Politicians scrambled to hold press conferences condemning what they called modern-day targeted policing. But the twist didn't stop there. For days after the attack, a new video surfaced, one no one expected. It was leaked by an anonymous source inside the HOA's security contractor, and it showed something chilling. 2 weeks before the attack, Karen had been recorded talking to the contractor's assistant in a supermarket parking lot. The audio, though grainy, was clear enough to hear her say, "That girl and her father need to be controlled. I'll take care of it. One incident is all it takes." She planned it. The attack wasn't a sudden burst of anger. It was an emotional loss of control. It was premeditated, intentional, a calculated attempt to scare Zara and drive our family out of the community. I felt sick hearing the recording. My hands shook. My throat closed. Zara, still recovering in her hospital bed, looked at me with wide, frightened eyes when I played it for her. "She wanted to hurt me," she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. She really wanted to hurt me. I hugged her tightly, holding her as if my arms alone could shield her from the entire world. But inside, something else ignited, a fire hotter and sharper than rage, a determination that justice wouldn't just be served, it would be delivered in full. The FBI called an emergency press conference. Standing behind podiums with solemn expressions, they announced the expansion of the investigation. We have uncovered evidence of premeditation, systemic surveillance abuse, and racially motivated targeting, the lead agent said. Multiple individuals will be charged with conspiracy, civil rights violations, and endangerment of a minor. Reporters gasped. Cameras flashed. The nation held its breath. And then she added, "We are also investigating whether the surveillance network was used to influence property values and target families for removal. This may be the largest HOA corruption scandal in state history." The twist kept escalating, because the more they unraveled, the more horrifying the truth became. Old residents began coming forward, sharing stories of their experiences. A single mother revealed that she was forced out after Karen fabricated violation notices against her. A veteran said he was fined repeatedly for making too much noise while unloading groceries. A young couple confessed that they moved out after Karen accused them of lowering the community standard. All targeted, all minorities, all buried under years of silence. It wasn't an HOA community, it was a controlled system designed to remove families who didn't fit a certain image. And now, the entire rotten structure was collapsing. But the biggest twist, the one that changed the trajectory of the entire investigation, came when Zara woke up one morning, looked at me with trembling lips, and said, "Daddy, I remember something." Her voice was small, but her words carried the weight of truth that would shock every investigator listening. Karen wasn't alone. My heart stopped. "What do you mean?" I whispered. Zara swallowed hard. Just before she kicked me, someone else said, "Do it, now." Karen wasn't acting alone. She had help, and the real mastermind was still out there. The moment Zara said those words, Karen wasn't alone. Someone else said, "Do it, now." The entire investigation shifted direction like a lightning bolt cutting through a clear sky. Agents who had been preparing final reports suddenly snapped to attention. Conversations halted mid-sentence. The lead investigator who had handled the case with a calm steeliness from day one leaned forward with an urgency I hadn't seen before. "Zara," she said gently, "are you absolutely sure?" My daughter nodded, her eyes glossy but determined. "Yes. I didn't remember at first, but now I do." Those words cracked open a door everyone thought had been closed. And behind that door wasn't just more danger, but the final piece of truth the nation had been waiting for. Immediately, the room transformed into a coordinated hive of motion. Agents called for audio enhancement, for timeline cross-checking, for voice print matching. They replayed every second of the viral footage, zooming into shadows, analyzing background noise, scanning reflections on car windows, even remapping the HOA parking lot with 3D imaging. And then, in one quiet, devastating moment, they found it. A faint silhouette behind a pillar near the clubhouse, standing still, watching, and, according to the enhanced audio, whispering the exact words Zara remembered. When the silhouette was isolated and matched against HOA security footage, the result stunned everyone. It was the HOA's vice president, Alan Mercer. Alan was the last person anyone suspected. Soft-spoken, well-dressed, friendly in a two-faced, political way. But beneath that polished exterior, investigators found something chilling. In his emails retrieved from newly uncovered servers, they found messages that aligned disturbingly with the leaked recording, discussions about cleaning the community, about removing problematic families, about letting Karen do what she does best. He wasn't just an accomplice, he was the architect. Karen had been his weapon, and the surveillance contractor had been his shield. It was a triangle of power, intimidation, and manipulation designed to quietly push out families who didn't match his vision of a perfect neighborhood. Evidence showed Alan had even approved budgets for clandestine cameras and covert monitoring. "We can't have the wrong kind of people lowering property values," one of his messages read. a line so hateful, it made headlines within minutes of its release. When agents arrived at Alan's home to arrest him, he attempted to flee through the back door, clutching a suitcase and a burner phone. But the street was already blocked, helicopters circling overhead. He surrendered with shaking hands, his once perfect composure shattered. The footage of him being handcuffed became symbolic, the moment when the country saw the real mastermind fall. Karen, meanwhile, unraveled completely in custody. When investigators confronted her with the evidence, the surveillance logs, the premeditation recording Zara's testimony, she broke down sobbing, claiming Alan manipulated her, pressured her, convinced her he had the legal authority to remove families by force. But her guilt was undeniable. The kick was hers. The violence was hers. The hatred was hers. And the consequences were coming. The DOJ held a press conference that shook the entire nation. This case, the spokesperson announced, reveals the most extensive misuse of HOA authority, illegal surveillance, and racially motivated targeting uncovered in suburban governance. They then listed the federal charges against Alan and Karen: conspiracy, aggravated assault, hate crimes, child endangerment, illegal surveillance, civil rights violations, and obstruction. The entire country watched. Some cried, some cheered, some simply stared in disbelief. What started in one small neighborhood now stood as a national reckoning, a moment where hidden injustice was dragged into the light for all to see. Meanwhile, Zara's name became a symbol of bravery. Messages poured in from across the world. Children sent drawings. Schools held assemblies about standing against bullying and hatred. Civil rights organizations praised her courage in helping expose the truth. Zara, still resting, whispered to me one night, "Daddy, I didn't mean for all this to happen." I held her hand, brushing her hair from her face. "Baby," I said, voice thick with emotion, "you didn't cause this. Bad people did. You just helped the world see what they were hiding." She smiled softly, the kind of smile that hurts because you see innocence trying to recover. As the investigation wrapped up, the attorneys general from several states joined forces to propose a national HOA reform act, something that hadn't been attempted in decades. They cited Zara's case directly. No neighborhood in America should ever have this kind of unchecked power again, one senator declared. In the weeks that followed, multiple HOAs across the nation were audited. Thousands of families shared their experiences. A wave of accountability spread like a cleansing tide. And although the airports were eventually reopened after a nationwide review of emergency protocols, the message remained permanently etched in aviation history. When injustice becomes national, the nation responds together. The day the trial began, the courthouse overflowed with supporters wearing shirts that read "Justice for Zara" and "Protect Every Child." Karen entered the courtroom in shackles, her expression defeated. Alan walked in behind her, pale and hollow. Their lawyers tried to argue diminished responsibility, misunderstanding, stress, but the evidence was overwhelming. The recordings, the logs, the surveillance network, the accomplice whisper, the witnesses, the national outrage. The judge, in a voice sharp as steel, declared them both guilty on all major counts. Karen received a lengthy sentence for aggravated assault on a minor and hate crime enhancement. Alan received even more: conspiracy, civil rights violations, surveillance crimes, and intent to cause harm. When the verdict was read, the courtroom erupted in relief, in emotion, in closure. Zara squeezed my hand, her eyes shining with tears. "It's over," she whispered. "Daddy, it's finally over." After the sentencing, something beautiful happened. The residents of the HOA, the same community once too scared to speak, voted unanimously to dissolve the entire HOA structure. They replaced it with an independent neighborhood council led by diverse, fair, compassionate members. They apologized publicly to Zara. They renamed the community park after her, Zara Hope Park, a place for children to play safely, freely, without fear. At the ribbon cutting, Zara stood beside me, her ribs healed, her smile brighter than the sun dipping behind the trees. She held the scissors with both hands and whispered, "This is for every kid who felt scared before. And In that moment, watching her strength, watching her courage, watching her reclaim the place where she was once hurt, I knew justice wasn't just served. Justice was reborn. Before this story ends, I want to speak directly to you, the amazing person watching this right now. If Zara's courage touched your heart, if you believe every child deserves safety, if you believe hate has no place in our communities, then please take a second to support this channel so stories like hers never stay hidden again. Drop your city in the comments. I want to see how far our family reaches across the USA and the world. Hit the like button so this story reaches more people who need to hear it. Subscribe if you stand for justice, truth, and protecting our kids. And share this video with someone who needs to remember that courage can change everything. Your engagement doesn't just help the channel. It helps amplify voices that deserve to be heard. Thank you for watching, thank you for standing with Zara, and thank you for being part of a community that believes in doing what's right,